Hello and welcome again to Sport Unlocked, the podcast giving you the global insight on the world of sports news with analysis and interviews. Coming up, we've got two special guests. Tim Sparv, he's the former Finland captain who's concerned about football's involvement with human rights abusing nations. We're also joined by the Olympic swim medalist Sharron Davies to discuss transgender rights in sport. I'm Rob Harris from the Associated Press. Alongside me as ever, Tariq Panja from the New York Times and Martyn Ziegler from the Times, with quite a packed agenda we've got this week on episode 62.
Yeah, we've got lots to talk about this week, as per bidding for Euro 2028 football, transgender sport, really controversial, toxic issue there we'll be covering. The usual delve into the crypto world and much more, guys.
So much to get through, and we'll go in depth on some of those issues shortly. But first, some of the talking points of this sporting weekend. And as so often on the pod, our focus is on the Gulf and really dramatic and potentially concerning scenes in Jeddah in the build-up to the second Grand Prix of the season in Saudi Arabia, and an oil depot that was attacked near to the Grand Prix circuit by Yemen's Houthi rebels.
Yeah, Rob, the war in Yemen, we mentioned that last week as one of the other major conflicts around the world at the same time as Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And now it is very much come into the spotlight. You can see the smoke billowing from the oil depot that was allegedly targeted there. The smoke plumes, black smoke plumes rising above the racetrack. And, you know, that really brings it home. What do you think? The Formula One leaders have said the race will go on, but it must cast a pall over the race itself. It must be a very strange atmosphere.
Yeah, at the time of the recording, they're insistent the race will be going ahead, and it's already a Grand Prix that's been dogged by human rights questions about even going to Saudi Arabia, the killing, the execution of 81 men a couple of weeks ago, and this brings the Saudi-led war on Yemen right to the doorstep of sport, to F1. And of course, this is a war coalition that's being led by Saudi, and it also involves the UAE. And just in this last week too, concerns and criticism from the British government about one particular member of the UAE's ruling family, Sheikh Mansour, over just who he was meeting.
Yeah, quite bad timing for Manchester City, given Roman Abramovich has been thrown out of the Premier League for his close relationship with Vladimir Putin. We had images of Sheikh Mansour, the owner of Man City, but he's also the deputy prime minister, I understand, of the UAE, having a meeting with another international pariah, Bashar al-Assad, the autocrat, the leader of Syria, a country that has been backed by Russian weapons.
That civil war in Syria being going on for 11 years, and Putin and his Russian forces have helped to prop up Assad, and you can see why the British government have said they're so concerned in relation to this meeting by the UAE and Sheikh Mansour. The concern about anyone who is undermining the prospect of a lasting and inclusive peace in Syria. Of course, football and sport so widely interlinked into the Mideast. We've got the draw for the World Cup in Qatar next week, the first big real event there in the build-up to the tournament, the Football World Gathering. And, well, we do know there's one country that won't be going, that's Gianni Infantino's Italy.
Yeah, one of the great shocks in international football history, I'd say. Italy getting knocked out at home in that European playoff by North Macedonia in the 92nd minute. I think great goal, that shot from outside the area. But again, it'll be the second World Cup in a row in which Italy aren't going to be participating. Of course, they're European champions, Rob.
Yeah, so the next time they can qualify is for the 2026 World Cup, but they are helped by the fact that the World Cup will expand from 32 to 48 teams, so it's going to be really hard for Italy or any major nation to miss out again. And we won't have this excitement in qualifying to the same degree, I'd expect, in Europe in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be, instead of 14, 2 extra spots for Europe, so 16. South America, where more than half of the teams often qualify, half of the 10. You can't imagine a qualifying campaign there at all, really. It'd be interesting to see whether FIFA, as we're discussing the future calendar, revamp the qualification process for the World Cup in its entirety? Because it looks like it'd be quite dull with all these extra spots available.
Yeah, maybe fans can occupy them times on the crypto exchanges instead, because now, for the first time, FIFA have signed up a crypto sponsor. Crypto.com will only sponsor the World Cup this year in a country where crypto trading is banned in Qatar.
Well, I mean, that just says it all, doesn't it? That's just remarkable. FIFA would even go down that road in that if that's the case. But crazy. I mean, the whole, we seem to be submerged by crypto partnerships, NFTs, don't we? And I mean, part of me thinks that if people are stupid enough to risk their livelihoods on investing in unregulated electronic currency, then let them do it. But I mean, definitely whether sports bodies should be promoting that is another thing entirely.
And questions over whether sports bodies should be trading themselves in cryptocurrency, something that's been raised by clubs trying to even use it in transfer dealings. So this is far more than just a sports body like FIFA accepting a crypto sponsorship. It does almost give credence to the credibility of cryptocurrency, while others within the game have concerns about the use of such currency within deals.
There's so many areas where this deal or these types of deals for me are questionable. And, for me, I've focused on the environmental stuff. And also, if you look at what's happening in the world right now with high energy prices around the world because of the war in Ukraine, for example, this kind of crypto mining seems totally superfluous when regular citizens are struggling with fuel prices. This is just adding to the cost of all of that, isn't it? I've just seen, reading here an article that says Bitcoin mining uses 66 times more electricity than it did in 2015, and you've got to wonder what for. Like, what this means it's competing with other uses for energy.
So much for all those net zero pledges by sport, the plans to be carbon neutral. We heard so much around the COP summit last year, and crypto, just another way that they actually struggle to actually match those commitments, and particularly, of course, around tournaments as well. We've just had the Pan-European Euros last year. The process is underway for bidding for the European Championships of 2028 and 2032. This week, we thought it would all come to a potentially done deal sort of conclusion, with Britain and Ireland being unopposed for 2028 and Italy being unchallenged for 2032. Then, in midweek, just when we thought it was all coming to a smooth conclusion for UEFA, there was some fury within European football's governing body in Neon, because first, we had word from Russia that they had landed an expression of interest just before the deadline on Wednesday to bid for either 2028 or 2032. This, as the war is going on still, we're now over a month into Russia's attack on Ukraine. Not only that, Turkey then launched a bid as well for 2028 or 2032. So now it's a contested bid entries for the tournament. Russia, it just looks like they're doing this to try to unnerve, to try to agitate, to try to disrupt the world of football, coming at a time when their club and national teams have been booted out by both UEFA and FIFA. What better way to get back at UEFA at the moment than disrupting their process by launching a bid?
I think that's the only possible reason. I mean, they'll get 0 votes. So I mean, it really is sort of madness. But I think it is. Yeah, it's a sort of basically to piss off UEFA and probably the British as well, who are bidding the British, UK and Ireland bidding for Euro 2028. Yeah, obviously one of Russia's biggest opponents. So I'm sure it's a very much a sort of political tactic.
And it looks like UEFA are trying to find a way of disqualifying this Russia bid, maybe by banning their federation, because although their national teams are suspended currently from competitions by UEFA and FIFA, the Football Union of Russia still is active. The UEFA statement after the bids were launched made very clear that the Executive Committee can reassess the legal and factual situation around Russia as it evolves, and they have said that they will adopt further decisions as necessary, including in light of the declarations of interest as expressed for hosting the Euros. That was the UEFA statement, and the decision now with the executive committee, it seems, meeting in a week or so.
There is a Russian board member still on the UEFA executive committee, isn't there?
Yeah, it's an executive with Gazprom.
Yeah, it's Alexander Dukov, who is the chief executive of Gazprom, which is majority state owned. I'm not sure exactly how much dealings he's direct dealings he's been having, but yeah, he's still on the executive committee. So, I mean, it's we will see what happens with this, but it's a really interesting development.
Far livelier than we expected. This very competitive field now for Euro 2028 and 32, depending who does make the final cut. Do Turkey stay in the race? Their shock late entry really stunned UEFA. Well, in April we'll get the final announcement of bidders by UEFA once the nations have received all their bidding requirements. The final bids then don't need to be submitted until April 2023. The decision by UEFA, September 2023. But what a situation this is for UEFA, particularly with the Russia situation to deal with too, and their attempted bid.
In fact, talking about sort of the Russia and Ukraine war, one interesting thing which has emerged this week is that the Premier League and Serie A are refusing to allow clubs to sign players from the Ukrainian and Russian leagues for the rest of the season. There was special dispensation given by FIFA and UEFA for that to happen, but they're refusing to allow it, saying it could damage sporting integrity because there's if some clubs would get an advantage from signing players and other ones wouldn't. So, which I think it seems to me a fairly short-sighted move.
Yeah, and also it screams of, again, a bit of hypocrisy here. If you remember, there were a bunch of games postponed before Christmas in England because of coronavirus. Clubs were accusing each other of manufacturing some of these cases to have the games called off. I remember the integrity issue is this, is that Newcastle, for example, able to spend north of £100 million, change their team, and they've been quite successful, and play against opponents they would have played with these new players. So in terms of integrity, signing a couple of players from Ukraine or these players who FIFA have allowed to leave Russia shouldn't cause that much of a difference, should it?
Well, I can't see it.
Well, we can now get a footballer's perspective on that and delve further into how matters on the pitch intersect with the geopolitical and human rights issues. We're joined now by the former Finland captain, recently retired, Tim Sparv, who hit the headlines recently for a Players' Tribune piece advocating activism over the Qatar World Cup. Tim, welcome to Sport Unlocked.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to move on to talk about some of the Qatari issues that you've raised in a moment, particularly ahead of the draw next week. But first of all, we've been covering a lot on the pod in recent weeks, the impact of Russia's war on Ukraine. And you have taken some families in, haven't you, in Finland?
Yeah, that's correct. I was sitting at home with my family and thinking about how can I help? How can I, in a concrete way, help these people fleeing their country? I mean, it was difficult it's difficult for the Ukrainians, but you have that sense of helplessness at home. I think, what can you do as an individual? So we were donating money like everyone else. We were being vocal on our social media platforms. We were going to the city, protesting against the war. But we still felt like, okay, we need to do something else. We need to do more. And then came to my mind that I have an apartment in Vasa where quite frankly, I don't spend that much time in. So I felt like, okay, this is perfect for refugees coming to Vasa, coming to Finland, and giving them the opportunity to stay in my place. So I have now a mother with her 2 kids living in my apartment in Vasa, and that feels great for them. It feels good for me to be able to help in this concrete way.
Well, I mean, what's the sort of the sort of feeling like about the war in Ukraine? Because obviously Finland's got a huge land border with Russia, and there's been a few sort of remarks from Putin about Finland. What's the sort of general feeling there?
Yeah, I think that we woke up a little bit. I thought we knew where we had Putin. I thought we knew where we had Russia. I think we were maybe a little bit naive. So there's a big debate now if we should join NATO or not. It's a big debate of if are we stronger being on the outside of the NATO coalition, or should we actually be a part of it? So yeah, I mean, we are concerned. We're not. I wouldn't say that we're scared, but we're definitely concerned of how this war might evolve, and if Russia at some point might be interested in taking parts of our country as well. But I want to I'm really happy to see the kind of solidarity that we have in my city, in Vasa. Just having these people in my apartment. I got so many texts, so many phone calls from friends, relatives, acquaintances that just ask, how can we help Tim? What can we do for them? They were offering to give them clothes, bicycles, food, offering to come and say hello, and trying to start a friendship. So I'm really, that makes that makes my heart warm, and I'm really happy that everybody's so empathetic about their situation. And last Saturday, I took Ivan, the 8-year-old boy, to his first football training ever, and he was, for 1.5 hours, he was just, laughing and having fun, not thinking about the war at all. Today, I'm taking Sasha, the 12-year-old girl, to her first football training in her life. So, it's already now I just feel that connection, and I feel like I want to help them in any way that I can, and try to bring back some kind of normality to their life, and it's really a team effort, and everybody's willing to help, and that makes me proud of the Finnish response to this war.
I mean, it's interesting how you're using football to help sort of give them some sort of hope. When you look at those images, which you'd have seen of Gianni Infantino and Vladimir Putin at the 2018 World Cup, and since then, so close, cozying up to each other, how does that make you feel? How do you think footballers feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, you wanna throw up when you see those images, and football it's such a big sport. I really like to focus on the basic values that football is trying to convey. Taking these kids to their first football training, they don't understand the language, but football is so universal, and getting the chance to meet friends in their age, and somehow trying to integrate into society. That's what it's all about. That is what football is all about, and that's a big contrast to these big institutions with a long history, tradition, where money plays too big a part in how football is run.
FIFA at least did give the option for players from Ukraine and Russia to leave those leagues and join other clubs until the end of the season. But we've heard from England and Italy that Serie A and the Premier League won't actually be allowing clubs there to sign any of these players who've left those countries.
Well, I think this is an exceptional case in our society, and I think we should be helpful to the footballers wanting to continue their career, wanting to play somewhere else. So I think we should be. I think we should change the rules. I think we should be open-minded. I think we should be, empathetic of what they've gone through, and give them the chance to play somewhere else. I think this is not a normal period in our lives, and it's an exceptional time. And I think we should be a little bit more, understanding of them and their situation, and give them the chance to go and play somewhere else.
For many years now, we've been concerned about Russia's actions and still hosting sporting events, particularly the World Cup in 2018. Do you think this will sort of bring home the reasons why footballers in particular in future will be wary about playing in certain countries, associations with regimes like Russia?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I find it strange that we have the Olympic Games in a country like China. I find it really strange that we have the World Cup in a country like Qatar. I think that right now we're raising awareness of some of these issues and questions more frequently than we did maybe 10 years ago. So I think that we're moving in the right direction, but it's taking some time. It's a really slow process, but I think we just generally we need to have more focus on basic human rights questions. Leadership based on values instead of trying to find a sponsor that pays the most. So I think there's still room for improvement, and seeing how football is led today. I still feel we have a long way to go before it's a healthy environment, a sustainable environment.
Do you think players have enough of a say in how decisions are made? There's you here on this podcast talking about what you would like to see, but given that you guys are actually on the field and it's your performances that generate the interest and the money, there doesn't seem to be much of a role in the decision making. So, would you like to see a major reform in that sense?
I would really like to see a major reform. I think there needs to be a diverse group of people coming together to find the best solution for that, those questions that are on the table. And I think we don't see that today. I would love players to have a say in things. I would love for their voice to be heard and respected. I would love coaches having a say in things, supporters having a bigger say in things. And I don't feel that there needs to be a clash of opinions if we want to find the best make the best decisions, and I don't feel that we have that right now.
The players, I often find they're in a curious position. Some of the big players, like for example, I guess one of the most sought after players right now is Erling Haaland, who's playing for Norway. Norway were one of the football associations that protested the Qatar World Cup, for example, wearing the t-shirts. But now there is a lot of talk, and there's a good possibility that Erling Haaland will join Manchester City, which is owned by the United Arab Emirates, and obviously human rights concerns there. How do you square, how do you square this as players between who's going to pay your salaries and then the human rights causes that you guys take up?
Yeah, I mean that's not an easy question to ask. It's a very challenging position for some of these players, because all they want to do is compete at the highest level. All they want to do is develop into a better athlete. And what I take with me from the last couple of years, player activism and more and more athletes becoming vocal and talking about issues that are bigger than sports. I still feel that maybe some of them are a little bit too silent. They have a major platform to speak from, a really good chance to influence people's lives, have an impact in society, but I still feel that they're not taking advantage of that, and that's a bit disappointing in a way. But yeah, a lot of athletes, Haaland, he's put in a tough spot. What do I know? Maybe Man City is his favorite club. He gets to work with the best coach in the world. He gets to win Premier Leagues and maybe Champions Leagues. It's difficult to say no to that. But at the same time, they have an owner that has he has blood on his hands. So it's just it's just strange.
And next, Tim, you're going to Qatar ahead of the draw. You really use your platform through the Players Tribune to speak out your concerns about human rights and abuses in Qatar. What are you hoping to achieve on your visit to Qatar? What impact do you think you speaking out has actually had in maybe helping other players use their voice, and also to raise awareness, and also to bring about change in Qatar?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to go down to Qatar on Friday and meet some influential people down there, and maybe learn a little bit more about what is being made, the progress that has been made, and how it is with the worker centers that they want to build, and the chances of that actually happening. So I'm I'm happy to actually be able to go there and be on the ground and speak to migrant workers, speak to people who know more about this subject than I do, and educate myself a little bit. So I think that's good, because this has really been a personal journey for me the last couple of years, learning more about human rights questions, learning more about the problems with giving these major tournaments to countries like Qatar. So I'm looking forward to that.
How was it that Finland ended up scrapping that training camp in Qatar? Could you describe those circumstances?
We were going to these warm countries for training camps in January for a long time. So first we were going to Dubai, and then we went to Qatar and Doha for a few years, and we were actually not thinking too much about it back then, until one of our players, Riski, actually decided, okay, this is against my beliefs. This is, from an ethical standpoint, this is not something that I wanna support. So he was selected for the training camp, but he decided, I don't wanna go there. So that was the trigger for me to actually, stop and say, okay, what is it that we're part of? What are we, indirectly supporting here? So that was a training camp in January. It's something that we can, ourselves influence. So we don't need to go there. We can actually take this training camp and go to Spain or Portugal or somewhere else. So we talked about it in our team. We talked about it amongst our players. We had a good discussion with the federation and said, okay, this is not something that is compatible with our values and belief system. So we scrapped that training camp, and the next years we would have gone to Spain if it wasn't for COVID.
I mean, in the past, I think it's fair to say, players say, or managers, we're only going to concentrate on the sport and what's happening on the football pitch. Do you now believe that actually we are going to have much more sort of activism from current players?
I definitely hope so, and I think we will see a generation of athletes that are more vocal than older generation have been. I think this view of athletes 24/7 having to focus on their sport, like that is going to improve your performance somehow. I don't agree with that. For me personally, it's been really beneficial actually taking a step back and thinking about something else. I think it's really important that, because this is a very artificial environment. I think young players today, some of them earn a lot of money. They play in front of 40,000-50,000 people. It's not a normal environment where they would normally end up thinking about other issues. So I hope that we will see athletes that are vocal and talks about things that are close to their heart, because I think I feel that we have a responsibility to the public and to the younger generation to highlight some of these issues in society that are not perfect. And I look for inspiration when it comes to America and the culture over there. I think they're a step ahead of us, a step ahead of Europe, but it's coming more and more to us as well, and that's positive.
In Italy, in Serie A last week, we had an AC Milan, Mike Mangon, the goalkeeper. He had bottles and drinks thrown at him, and Tamori, the defender there, and that was only because they were black. And we have these racist incidents in several countries, but in Italy, it's repeated, and then there's this appeal for people to stop doing it. And again, obviously you might not be the right person, but do you think it's time for just a week off for players to not play an entire match round now? Because nothing seems to be doing the trick when it comes to racism.
Yeah, I think that racism is one of society's biggest problems right now. I mean, we see it. We have racism everywhere in every country, but it seems to be an even bigger problem in Italy, and all these campaigns that are trying to highlight these issues. It seems like it's just stuck. It's not getting anywhere. We're not improving anything. We see social media is breeding this thing, and it's becoming an even bigger issue. No one is really taking any kind of responsibility to change our environment and actually getting to terms with how can we create an environment that is safe and secure for everyone to do what they love. So I'm just that sense of helplessness, of what can we do to solve this issue, because it's something that is not going away.
Would you agree to a walk off if all the players just don't play, given the contribution of black athletes to European football? Would you back an idea that they just for an entire week refuse to go on the pitch? Will that maybe show people the value of the players that they're abusing?
Yeah, I think it's a more concrete gesture than maybe just having a campaign or posting a photo on your Instagram account. So I think that would maybe make people stop and think a little bit about why they are there and what is happening and what these black players are going through. So I hope, and I think that would be a good solution, a good idea.
Tim, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Tim Sparv, the former Finland captain and now a real activist in the world of football, still after hanging up his boots. Turning to the United States now, and the huge debate since Lia Thomas became the first transgender woman to win an NCAA swimming title. Has the University of Pennsylvania athlete gained a biological advantage in the pool since beginning transitioning in 2019? Or should we just celebrate the courage and success of her? After all, she did follow the sporting rules with her hormone replacement therapy. One swimmer who thinks it's unfair for Lia to be competing against women is Sharron Davies. She competed in the pool at 3 Olympics for Britain and won silver in Moscow in 1980. Sharron joins us now. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So it's a very complex issue, this. Lia Thomas, which category should she compete in? How should she be able to compete in the sport she loves?
It's complex, and at the same time, it's absolutely not complex. Sport is all about our bodies. It's our bodies that race, not our feelings. So I believe very strongly that we should be racing by biological sex. However, there are some anomalies in that. For example, if you take trans men, which no one ever speaks about because there are no threat to men's sport whatsoever, so they don't even get included in the conversations most of the times. But if they are a female that's on testosterone, then they wouldn't be able to compete in the women's category. So therefore, they'd have to go somewhere, unless they were prepared to not take testosterone, still identify as a trans man, which is what happened at the NC2As. But nobody spoke about that, of course, because it wasn't interesting, and still carried on and competed in the women's category. Now, you have to ask, why would they carry on and compete in the women's category? Because that's where they're only likely to win. So this is what it's all about. It's about not enabling biological females to have the equal opportunities that biological males have to have success in sport. So straightforward, the way to do that, because inclusion is really important. Of course, everyone should be able to compete. So I guess my solution after being involved now for 3 years would be a protected female classification and an open and inclusive classification where everyone is very welcome. And that would be trans men and trans women. So trans men that are biological females on testosterone and therefore illegal, and trans women who are biologically male with a male puberty advantage, which is quite considerable. In some events, you're talking about up to 30%. And in something like boxing, a male of equal weight and strength and height will hit 160% harder than a female. So in a contact sport, this is a serious accident waiting to happen.
Sharron, Seb Coe, he's now the World Athletics president. He spoke out. I think he said something like gender should never trump biology. But World Athletics, they have a testosterone limit, don't they? So they allow transgender women to compete in women's events, but they have to have a sort of reduced testosterone. I think it's 5 nanomoles per liter. Well, is that okay, do you think, having this testosterone limit?
Well, the whole thing has become very grey and very confusing. And at the moment, all of the peer-reviewed studies shows that you cannot mitigate male puberty advantage by reducing testosterone alone. And So therefore, I don't know how we're going to do this. And how much of an advantage is an okay advantage to give away? When ultimately we spend millions every single year trying to mitigate people from cheating by taking drugs. So the whole thing is so confusing and such a mess at the moment. And we need to come up with some clear guidelines so that they're easy to implement and we don't end up going to court every 5 seconds. USA Swimming have tried to come up with a stronger policy, one that wasn't used at the NC2As last week when Lia was actually swimming. And had those rules been implemented, she wouldn't have been able to swim, because they were insisting on 5 nanomoles of testosterone for 3 years. And then a panel of 3 people where the transgender athlete had to show that they'd mitigated against their male biology advantage. Now, Lia, when she competed as a man 2 years ago, didn't even make the top 500. And that was in university swimming. So that's not across the whole of America or across the whole of the world. That's just in university swimming. And then she became NCAA's women's champion, beating 3 Olympic silver medalists. I'm sorry, but it's ridiculous. And it means that biological females at the moment are being discriminated against in our own category of sport.
How have we got into such a pickle with this? As you said, the kind of results speak for themselves in many ways. You've just articulated that. How has sport found itself in such a web, such a mess? It shouldn't be this complicated, should it?
Well, I mean, if you want to, lay the problem at somebody's feet, the IOC, yet again, for not doing what they're supposed to have done, many years ago. In 2015, they changed the rules, not in time for Rio, so that didn't affect anybody that would be at the Rio Olympic Games. It was only the Tokyo Olympic Games, the first Olympic Games that trans athletes could absolutely qualify. And we had Laurel Hubbard in the weightlifting. And we're just going to see it more and more and more unless we do something about it. I started campaigning 3 years ago when these rules became very, very prevalent and said, it's wrong that we're going to have to lose medals and places of world champion female athletes to prove the obvious, that biological males are stronger than biological females. We know that categorically. We have all the peer-reviewed evidence. We have all the results at all the major competitions of any sport ever. So I find it so frustrating that we're throwing so many potential young females under the bus just to prove an obvious point. So you take one race, that Lia won the 500-yard freestyle. There was the girl that didn't make it to the top 16 to the semi-finals. There was the girl that wasn't able to make it to the final, to the top 8. There was the girl that came 4th who didn't pick up a medal. There was the girl that came 2nd who ended up not being the NC2A champion. So there was 5 girls in that particular event that lost out to things that they should have received by someone that had a biological advantage. And that was just in one event at one championships. So this isn't about the odd person. This is about many, many females, that are going to lose out. And then the effect that's going to have on young people when they don't have biological females in sport to look up to, because biological males are winning their races.
Mm-hmm. It's an incredibly toxic debate, isn't it? I mean,
it is.
On
but
both
we have
sides,
to be honest, don't we, Martyn? We have to talk facts.
Yeah.
Not feelings, because bodies are what actually do sport. Feelings don't do sports.
How do we balance that, though? The fact that taking into account someone's own personal feelings, how it affects them, how it impacts their mindset, being discussed in public as well, their bodies being analysed in public, their decisions being analysed, that what they see as their self-identity and their denial of their right to compete.
So, what I don't understand is we don't have anyone identifying as a 10-year-old when they're 15 and racing in the 10-year-old race and us thinking that's all okay. Or someone identifying as an OAP and going off and winning the Masters when they're in the prime of their lives. I just don't understand how we can identify out of a classification. And by nature, sport does exclude people, because that's why we have classifications. That's why we have weights in boxing, so that we don't have a bantamweight going up against a heavyweight. So by nature, sport is exclusionary because we're trying to create level playing fields. So why is saying that we would like to have a race for biological females, banning anybody? It's just creating the same category for a level playing field. And I'm very pro-inclusion, as I mentioned. I just think we have to be allowed to talk about this honestly, work with scientists and come up with a solution. And the only genuine solution that I can come up with after working with it and talking about it for many years now is an open and inclusive classification. Because otherwise, if we have all sorts of panels sitting, we're just going to have constant arguments and constant court cases and constant different specialists coming up with different opinions, and we're just going to go round and around in circles. So we've got to find a simple way to solve the problem.
Would that category replace the men's category?
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way that it would really work, I think. I mean, a lot of people say, well, let's have a trans category. Well, I'm all for that as well, but where would we put it? You know, what would we have? A trans category at the Olympic Games where maybe we'd have 5 people in the race? Would we have trans men versus trans women? You know, I don't think that's the solution. I think the sensible solution is the protected female classification and the open classification, because then it does give somewhere for trans men, biological women that are on testosterone, to actually race. And at the moment, they don't really have anywhere to race. And the only way they can race is to not go on testosterone, which is what they do, because they know that really, if they go into the men's classification, they have no chance of winning whatsoever. So they don't do it. And the same thing happens with anyone that identifies as non-binary. You know, at the Olympic Games, we had non-binary athletes who all decided to race in the women's category because that's where they were going to win. They didn't we're non-binary, but we're going to go and race in the men's category. They didn't. So at the moment, it's women that are losing out, females, biological females that are losing out, and it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Why have you decided to sort of be so vocal? There must be so many athletes who just really tread carefully and don't want to speak out in public. There must, you know, you're getting a backlash from people. Why have you chosen to sort of take this on publicly?
Less the backlash now that people are seeing what's actually happening, which is great. And I'm very excited for FINA's rules to come out, because I know that they have got some quite good ideas. I know that the World Swimming Coaches Association have got some very strong ideas about protecting female athletes. So I think people are now beginning to feel that we can talk about this, which is what we should have been able to do 3 years ago without the backlash. I have athletes every single day, big name competing athletes in this country, ringing me up in tears. I have coaches ringing me up in tears. I even have officials ringing me up. Everyone is getting incredibly frustrated, and everyone, as you say, is frightened to speak out. Why are we frightened to speak out? Mm-hmm. You know, why is that allowed to happen, that people are not allowed to discuss this and try and find a solution? We don't need to be disrespectful to people. We just need to talk facts and biology.
Kirsty Miller, who's
oh, lovely Kirsty. Okay.
She's, I think, a transgender athlete. So
yeah.
She's tweeted saying there is currently no substantial research evidence of any biological advantages that would impede the fairness of trans women competing in elite women's sport.
But this is the same Kirsty Miller that's called me that says that I look more like a transgender woman than any transgender woman does before they've taken HRT. So you're giving a platform to people that insult all the time. You know, I've had a cyclist who said that I should die in a fat fire because I said that we need some fair sport for females.
Well, we've talked about this in the past, Sharron. I think part of your sort of reason for getting involved is because you sort of came up against the East German athletes who were basically taking sort of male hormones, weren't they? And they sort of deprived you of the gold medal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably why I speak out the most. You know, I spent 20 years where the IOC did not do their job, which was to look after fair sport. They enabled the East German system. So it wasn't the young girls' fault. You know, they were given these horrible, horrendous, old-fashioned steroidal steroids, testosterone, whilst they went through puberty to create a massive advantage. And on the whole, all the paperwork that we discovered when the wall came down in '89 was that it was about 9% an advantage that they were giving them. Now that's lower than pretty much the lowest any male to female advantage there is out there, because that ranges from about 10 to 30%. But they were absolutely dominant in women's events. In the Olympic Games in '76, in '80, would have been '84, but obviously they weren't there. And the last Games, '88, they very much dominated in swimming, track and field, rowing, but only in the women's events. And they would have athletes that would turn up that we'd never seen before, and they would compete and smash a world record. You know, they looked and sounded like men, and they have struggled with the side effects of what these drugs were. So not only did people like myself and British athletes that no one's ever heard of because they didn't make the medal podium, you know, miss out on their opportunities, a whole group of young girls were not looked after by the IOC, and some of them have gone on to actually die from what they were given. So I don't have a great deal of credibility for the IOC. You know, again, we look at the whole Russian situation where they should have come along after the Sochi and said, right, this is a state-run doping program. Russia, until you can clear your house out, you're banned. And yet in the Olympic Games, we had athletes from Russia competing who'd served 2 bans. And we still have it. We had it recently at the Winter Olympic Games, another travesty. So I think the IOC probably are the worst culprits in all of this. They could have sorted this out a long time ago, and no one has been brave enough to take the mantle on. And I'm very much hoping that FINA, who have decided to try and turn over a new leaf, we hope, will come up with a strong policy. USA Swimming's policy is not bad. It's still very, very confusing and will create a lot of judicial problems, I think, going forward. We need something that needs to be a bit more, clean and concise and easy to implement.
Sharron, just on the IOC here, you made a good point there. Another one about the Russians, and we've had the Sochi Olympics, the biggest doping scandal in recent memory, probably, and then they refused to ban them from Pyeongchang, from Tokyo, and now Beijing. Last week, Vladimir Putin held a rally in the stadium that hosted the World Cup final, the Soccer World Cup final. And on the podium with him were athletes wearing Olympic medals that they won at Beijing and at Tokyo, I believe. These are Olympic Games they shouldn't have been in, that people said that Russia hasn't been properly punished. Now, he's used that as a symbol of support for the war in Ukraine. What does that say about the IOC's credibility?
I don't think they have any credibility. I mean, you're talking to someone that doesn't believe that the IOC has any credibility whatsoever. I don't understand. I don't understand how they can run it the way that they do and how they're still in the position that they are, but they are. We need some massive reform. It needs to be incredibly transparent. We need real athlete representation as well, which doesn't happen. We need it not to be a bunch of, 60, 70-year-old men that want to have jolly trips and stay in 5-star hotels and all their expenses paid. We need the athletes put front and center. And we need fairness in sport, absolute first and foremost. And, whether that's coming up with a very good trans policy so that's clear and transparent and fair, and whether that's making sure that, sport doesn't go to countries with terrible human rights histories, or whether that's making sure that we implement proper drug penalties for people that try to cheat. These are all things that have not been done. And I find it very, very depressing. After all these years, we're still making the same mistakes over and over again. And that's back to Martyn's question, why do I do it? Well, that's why I do it. Because I hate unfairness. It really affected me. It affected lots of my friends. And I don't want it to affect another generation of young female athletes.
Do you think sport just never learns from its mistakes? So it gave cover for Putin despite the state-sponsored doping scandal, despite the invasion of Crimea in 2014, all the other issues that we've talked about, that actually we don't get the reform of sports leadership. We'll keep on going to other autocratic states with events, ones we don't view perhaps as badly as Russia, but we just keep as a world allowing sport to be used, abused, and the decisions not being taken often in the interest of athletes as well.
Yeah, it's always the same sort of strapline, isn't it? It's follow the money, sadly. And until we stop following the money and we try to be more ethical and transparent, I don't know that things will change.
But athletes want to earn money as well.
Yeah, athletes want to earn money, and so they should. But actually, I think it's 4% of revenue that comes out of the IOC that actually goes to the athletes. 4%.
Thanks for joining us on Sport Unlocked.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everybody.
Sharron Davies there. Well, we'll finish up with some football and changes to financial fair play from 2024, the new system we've been assessing and hearing for so long about, whether it be luxury tax or salary caps. Now there is a more firm position that is being discussed by UEFA and the European Club Association, and looks like we're going to have a new limit of 70% of income that can be spent by the clubs on football-related activities, including transfers, being phased in. Is this too weak or just inevitable, the fact they've had to revamp FFP?
Well, I think you've been sort of more negative about this than me, Tariq. I actually think it's quite a sort of good way into it. So you're going to actually have 70% of revenues is the total you can spend on both salaries and transfers. I mean, a lot of clubs spend that 70% on transfers, on salaries alone. So I think, and the fact you can have points deductions under the new the Champions League format, I think I think it's really interesting because I don't think FFP didn't really work.
No,
Just
I
might.
didn't, I'm not saying that FFP was working or not working. It depends what problem you're trying to solve, isn't it? Really, I think this was a great moment to tackle competitive balance as well as financial hardship or financial difficulties. And I think in terms of cleaning up balance sheets, it's probably quite good that you have a 70% cap, not only which will include wages, but also transfer amortization, which basically equates the amount of money you spend per season on transfers. But it doesn't do anything in terms of competitive balance at all. I feel it strengthens the positions of those teams that are already wealthy. It's particularly good for teams in the Premier League, I would have said. And one thing that I found interesting, Martyn, is that there were some teams in the Premier League that wanted that 70% to be even higher, as high as 85%, because they can afford it. They earn so much more money than everyone else that this 70% is the compromise.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they can afford that 85%. I mean, maybe they can, but I mean, look at Everton. I think theirs is 85%, and they're in terrible financial trouble. But yeah, it's all this thing about who are you trying to help? Are you trying to protect the strongest clubs, like to keep Real Madrid and Manchester United at the top forever? Or do you allow Chelsea, likes of Chelsea or PSG or Man City, to come in with a sort of beneficial owner and throw huge amounts of money at it? Because either are you trying to protect the status quo, or are you trying to? It's difficult to protect the status quo and also stop these sort of state-owned clubs coming in, isn't it? State-owned.
Well, it is. That's what I mean. They could have been a bit more imaginative in the rulemaking. This is like obviously a financial measure, but they could have been maybe a little bit cuter in terms of, I don't know, maximizing the number of transfers a team can do each summer, the number of players from the home market, a number of registered professional, whatever. There was none of this other stuff. And we had Alexander Seferin, the UEFA president, last few years. He kept saying the word luxury tax. We didn't see that. That's not come in. And we also heard him say salary cap in a number of interviews. That's not come in either. So this to me seems like a halfway house.
But the EU is never going to allow salary caps, it looked like.
Well, do we know that? I don't think the EU's actually said anything. And that's what we're hearing from people we know at UEFA, saying that, we wouldn't pass this through the European Union. But I'd love to know what type of salary cap we mean. What about an overall wage cap per club? Is that against the European Union? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems that's what's being sold.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a fair point, Tariq. That is a fair point, but I still not even sure that would work, to be honest, because it depends what your ultimate aim is, isn't it?
And how much clubs try to find a way round the rules as they do currently with financial fair play, or at least stretch them to the limit, that is. And we should have more clarity in the coming weeks about just what the new look regulations should look like as they start to be phased in. Of course, completely new look to the Champions League from 2024 with that Swiss model group stage, 36 teams all in one league table, 10 games in the group stage rather than 6. So many changes, so much for us to delve into. Never enough time. Although we could go on anything on this pod, but people might tune out. But it's been great to get your thoughts as ever, Tariq, Martyn.
Thanks, guys. Catch up soon.
Thanks, guys.
Also from Sharron Davies and Tim Sparv as well. And thank you, everyone, for listening. As ever, you can send any feedback to @SportOnLock on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But for now, enjoy the sports viewing in the days ahead. Goodbye.